3, 2, 1. Welcome back. This is ADWCTA.
This is Merps. We're actually talking about cards now. We're going to be going through
Cards.
neutrals. The best neutrals. Yay.
This is United and Stormwind card preview / valuation, and we have this not new. We did the same exact system, unchanged. This is our new Grinning Goat system of rating cards, and we did it with Barons, and we're using it here, where we grade them in tiers from F all the way up to S. And you know, we are being the harsh Asian parents we are. B is really good, actually. Like, if you think the card is really good and we're like, it's a B tier, that's because B tier is really good. And just to remind you guys, B tier is stuff like Basilisk, B plus is Rap Golem, B is like Blessing of Kings, B plus is like Holy Nova. So you're not a Flame Strike or a True Silver, you know, you're not a Twin Tyrant or a Deathwing, but you're good. You're good.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So, without further ado, we will present the #1 best card in United and Stormwind. This is the only card, the only neutral card, the only neutral non-legendary card that receives an A. Nothing else is A tier. We're gonna go down from A tiers. We're gonna do 8 cards in this video / episode / whatever you're watching or listening to us on. And this is the #1 card definitively, and it is Battleground Battlemaster. 5 mana, 5/5. Adjacent minions have Wind Fury. Remember, A tier is like around Twin Tyrant, so this card may not be as good as Twin Tyrant, but it's like right there.
This card is very interesting, and I've seen the discussions on Arena HS. So I understand the arguments against. You need a board. Like, you absolutely need a board. Some cards you just kind of need a board. This one, you're like, you really need a board because a 5 mana 5/5 by itself isn't cutting it. But that's fine. Like, a lot of really, really good cards throughout history, and still even now, I mean, we just talked about Silver Sword, right? Require you to have like somewhat of a board presence. What this card really does is, it's not even a battle cry, so you can chain it on both sides. It just puts so much pressure on the opponent, whether you have it, whether you don't. If you're not thinking about this card at the very least, once turn 5 starts, then you're not playing optimally. You have to at least think about this, which already speaks to its effect on the meta. Think about this situation. We've all been in this situation quite a few times. You have, let's say, 19 health. They are showing like a 5 damage minion and a 2 damage minion. And you want to drop your, I'm going to say Proto Drake. I understand Proto Drake is no longer in, but it's turn 8 and you're like, this is very safe, right? Like, this is very safe. And yeah, like, if they go face, I'm low-ish health, but I have like comeback mechanics, I have like taunts, it should be okay. That calculation changes drastically with this thing in the game, right? Now, instead of 7 damage, you're looking at 14 damage at the very least by them playing it. And then half of your hand, more than half of your hand, is pretty much invalidated past that point. So this is just one of those cards where you can see the impact on the meta immediately. Your thoughts about how much damage can they deal, how much reach can they possibly have, and also your own calculations of how much can I invalidate their hand really changes, right? It changes a lot. And remember, keep this in the back of your head. Initiative is not going to be the same, and your opportunities for discovering all of those spells as well is not the exact same anymore. So you thinking right now, Merps, it's so easy to just come back. It's so easy to Rusty Raider, Fishy Flyer. I'm gonna play Basilisk plus something big plus a broom. That's not happening anymore. So all of your comebacks are severely more limited now. You add all of that together. This is a card where the threat of it you should think about. And then, of course, when you are using it, there are so many ways to use it advantageously, to invalidate half of their hand or more, to just set up good trades as well. Remember, you can still value trade into something, then trade into something else. And then if you have a minion over it, like after it dies, you can use that to then Wind Fury their face. A lot of options are open. So I understand some people are looking at this and they're like, okay, there's going to be times in which it's not going to be as good. You know, the worst is when it's a 5-mana 5/5, and I agree. Like according to us, a 5-mana 5/5 is not good. There are times in which the Wind Fury doesn't really matter, right? Like not really.
Yeah, like you're going to trade anyway, so you just get some extra face damage when you don't really need it.
And I understand that as well. And then there are times in which this just wins you the game, or effectively it like discards 5 of their cards because you have done so much face damage that half of their hand is invalidated. So it's kind of the same idea. And I forgot who said this. Like it was a constructed player who compared this. Oh no, it was Casper. It was Hunter Ace. And it was a funny comparison because I think it was like Orange and Hunter Ace and all of them. And Hunter Ace looked at this card, and Hunter Ace was just like, "Oh, this is exactly like Lotheb." And they were like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, it's like Lotheb. Instead of preventing them from playing stuff, you just kill them." Because it's the same. Like with Hunter Ace, he's thinking of this exactly the same. He's like, Lotheb and this do pretty much the same thing, right? It's like you stop them from doing things, just like how this card stops them from doing things. When you are killing them or almost killing them, it's like you're stopping them from playing a significant portion of their hand at the same time. It's that sort of concept. I just thought it was really funny. And of course, you know, Hunter Ace being the brilliant, like super genius player that he is, would say something funny, but also very, very true at the same time, right? Lotheb, except you just killed them. That's what this card is.
It's pressure, pressure, pressure. It's pressure because of everything that Merp said, and more importantly, it's pressure when your opponent doesn't have it. It's pressure when you don't have it. Because this card is a common, because this card is the best card in the set in neutral, everyone is going to pick it when they can pick it, more or less. Which means this card is going to be seen a lot, which means you should play around this card. But can you play around this card? In the same way, when it gets to turn 8, everyone's like, oh no, there's a Twin Tyrant. Can I play around it? Probably not. Let's do whatever. That's how you think about Battlegrounds Battlemaster. It warps the entire freaking game. And for people who are out there thinking like, oh, you know, maybe sometimes it's not going to do that well. You need like, you know, cards on the board to get like whatever damage. You don't need much. If you have any 2 minions on the board, this is a free fireball to the face. If you have a big thing on the board, this is more than a fireball to the face. Free. Again, or almost free. It's a 5-mana 5/5. And if you have something like, if the thing like potentially taunts or whatever, then the Battlemaster will live another turn and do more stuff with other stuff. And you can play other stuff with the Battlemaster. The Battlemaster totally screws over any conception that you previously held about what is an acceptable amount of stuff to leave on the board so that you don't die the next turn. Almost any, like, remember how we've been talking for most of the last expansion about just how different, and really 2 expansions, for just how different it takes now to survive. Back in the day, you have 9 health, 7 health even, you feel pretty good. You're like, they're not going to kill me this next turn. I just count up damage on the board, and then like I add like somewhere between 5 and 6, and I'm good. And nowadays, it's like you really need more than 12 before you feel safe, because they can just swing the board, put a bunch of stuff in, and then you can't really respond in time. Well, with Battlemaster, you don't even get that extra turn to respond. You can't respond, right? That's why it's like Lotheb. Lotheb gives you like a turn where your opponent can't respond. Battlemaster just kills you. It just applies the most ridiculous amounts of extra reach. And there has never been a card like this before, printed before in the arena. I don't know what legendaries do in Constructed. I don't know what combos there are. But in Arena, you can't rely on combos. You rely on single cards. You rely on cards that do stuff. And Battlegrounds Battlemaster, being as good as it is, makes almost every single deck a either flip the board deck or just a pure aggro deck, because it is too good to ignore. And that's going to skew how all decks are drafted, how all decks are played, how all decks are played against. This is the meta. when it comes to United and Stormwind, which is funny. Because you think United and Stormwind would be about like building forts, buffing a lot of things up. But no, it's about having one thing or maybe two things with initiative and pounding you to the face.
Well, yeah, you have to taunt up because then you try not to give the Wind Fury stuff value.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's the thing. To give you guys an idea, because we do have ranges on this, right? Like to me, it's not. Obviously, this is not an S. This is not an A plus. For me, this is like a weak A.
Yeah.
Now, a weak A is still very, very high. Remember, an A, according to our old tier list, starts at a 200. So this is like a 200 minion for us.
Mm-hmm.
And this, if you look at cards, some cards are more consistent. Their standard deviation is going to be smaller. This has a bigger kind of range. It has a bigger standard deviation in terms of when it's game winning versus when it is just really not as good, right? Like I see people throwing around Fungalmancer. Fungalmancer is one of those cards that has a smaller range. Like the deviation is smaller. This deviation is going to be bigger, but when you look at something that can just win you the game and can invalidate such a large portion of their hand, we give that credit. We give that a good amount of credit, as you can see here.
So A should not be printed as a neutral card in the arena, and this card falls into that category. Now they do print a not insignificant number of cards that we rate A in the neutral category, so it's hardly alone. And people, you can look at it and be like, "Oh, it's not as good as a Scorpid." Fine, it's not as good as a Scorpid. It's not as good as a Twin Tyrant. It's not as good as a Twin Tyrant. But it is going to be a step above all the other cards that we're going to talk about. For this set, this is I'm going to look back at like I said, for Barons we had 3 A's and 2 of them were very weak A's. The 2 very weak A's we had at Barons were South Sea Scoundrel and Primordial Protector. So this is more similar to that than to like Venomous Scorpid, which is probably on the high side of what an A can be without getting into A plus territory. But again, just super, super powerful card. Okay. So this kind of sets the tone of United and Stormwind. And we're going to talk about the next card, which kind of continues the tone. So the next card is our only B plus neutral non-legendary card. The other 6 cards we're going to talk about in this episode or this segment are going to be rated B cards. That's why I prefaced it with B's are good. But also, this is not the most powerful set to come out. Like, this is taking kind of a step down in power level, which is fine, which is totally fine. But it has the same top end. It just doesn't have a lot of them. So the card that we rated a B plus is Traveling Merchant. Traveling Merchant is
So I'm gonna stop you. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Say your thing.
Traveling Merchant is a 3-mana 2/3 tradable battle cry. Gain +1/+1 for each other friendly minion you control. Like Frostwind. Frostwolf Warlord. There we go. Like that card that we all know and love.
All right. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, strong disagree on this one. I disagreed a lot. This is our official quote unquote rating. All right. This is a big stinker for me. Explain to them. Maybe you will explain something that you didn't explain to me, but I don't get it. Explain this one.
Okay, I can. Let's talk about tradable first, because it's the first time the tradable keyword has come in. Tradable allows you to do a separate action. It has like a secondary ability, which means you can drag it into your deck, which pays 1 mana and gets you another card. So it's a cycle. If you're a Magic the Gathering player, it lets you cycle for 1. It lets you get a new card. Now, how much is it worth, right? How much is tradable worth? Well, it depends on what kind of minion you put it on, or what kind of cards you put it on. For the most part, Blizzard didn't put tradable like willy-nilly on random cards, right? They put tradable on cards that are more situational, that you may be like, oh, I wish I had a different card than this one. And that is what makes tradable really powerful. Because they're situational-ish cards that when their situation doesn't trigger, rather than being useless or terrible or just underwhelming, become pretty decent, because now you're going to be able to try to find an answer that you will actually need. And the best of these kinds of tradable cards are the cards in which you play it and they're fine when you are up, but you want to trade them when you need an answer. Because when you're trying to find answers, you want to dig in your deck or you want to discover. You don't want to just hold answers in your deck that's in your hand that's unplayable until like a question pops up that you're answering. So, like, for example, I don't know, like, we'll talk about this more with the other card, but there's a card that, like, silences, for example, right? Like, silence is a great answer, but it's not a card you kind of just want to hold. It's more of a card that you want to get when you need a silence, right? Imagine top decking a silence. You're like, oh, so good. You know, now imagine top decking, like, a win more card. You're like, yay. Like, I like it, but it's not, like, as good. So that's what tradable gets at. Like, you want to make sure your tradable cards, they get more value when they are supporting your game plan. And you can trade them when your game plan goes awry to try to find an answer. Which is what Traveling Merchant does. But it's not like, this isn't even close to the best use of tradable. We're going to see some tradable cards that are like just freaking amazing and have so much value for being tradable. But just wanted to bring out this, kind of explain this kind of tradable concept and how you use it in the arena. It's not a good deal. Paying like a card that says draw a card for 1 mana is not a good card in the arena. So it's not like, oh, it has tradable, it must be a good card. No. If it's a crap card with tradable on it, it's still a crap card. It's just not like a bot. It's not like an F tier. I think if it's just a 1 mana draw a card, it would be like D plus or maybe even D, like maybe high D, low D plus.
The interesting thing about tradable, the concept, and because I got quite a few of these questions in the Discord, join our Discord if you haven't, by the way, but also questions in chat during the lead up of this time. And a lot of it has to do with what is the value of tradable. And like with many things, the answer is it depends. So tradable, its value depends on, let's just name a few factors, right? Because you can't just say like, oh, according to our tier list, tradable would add like 20 points or 30 points on the old scale, something like that. Mm-hmm. It's very different. So number one, the cost of the card originally, like that affects the value of the tradable on it, right? So whether it is low cost or high cost, you have different kind of reasons for you wanting to trade it. And number two, how situational it is. And you can even break that down further, as in, is it like a tech card? And what does that even mean, right? Is it like a super duper tech card? Are you talking about like a silence? Are you talking about kind of just like a hate card, right? Like imagine something like Dragon Slayer with tradable, right? Like is it just like a hate card? And then you want to also kind of see like with this sort of like situationalness, like how often do you want to potentially keep it in your hand? With some tradable stuff, it's just like, all right, well, I know this isn't happening anytime soon, whether it's in the stage of the game or depending on your deck. And with some, it's like, oh man, this might happen, right? Like we'll see, for example, with spell power +2, maybe you have like even a couple of spells in your hand. You're just not exactly sure if that's going to be useful. Like you're going to want to use the spells with the spell power. So the tradable mechanic is so interesting because there's so many factors, whether outside of the game or inside of the game, that you have to consider, such that it's hard for you to exactly put a just a static measurement on it. And of course, in game, it becomes very, very dynamic. And the more information you have, the better you're able to risk assess. The better you should be able to use this mechanic. Yeah. So it's especially a very simple mechanic, but
like in arena, things are very not clear cut of when you want to swap a card. In constructed, it's more so like you know what answers you have, you know they're very good answers, you know what odds are to draw it, you know what this card does. In arena, you know almost like none of that, or the answers are super fuzzy. Like you have 2 answers in your deck that are like 300% efficient rather than 900% the way it is in constructed. Do you trade it? Like I feel like you're gonna trade a lot more in constructed. than in Arena. In Arena, tradable is like a secondary option, rather than like and less of a matchup thing. But getting back to the Traveling Merchant specifically, 3 mana, 2/3, gain +1/+1 for each other friendly minion you control tradable. This card, I think, is sneaky good, which is why we have it as a B+. I don't think it's like a super strong B+, but I do think it's better than all the other cards that we are going to talk about. And that is because it's working on kind of 2 levels. So on one level, if you're just playing it as if it's a Frostwolf Warlord, you get 1 extra stat, right, on the health side, which is nice. And it's only 3 mana instead of 5 mana, which means you could probably play an extra minion at least a decent amount of time, so you get another +1/+1. Let's count that as half a minion. So let's imagine that it's just Frostwolf Warlord, but you get a extra +1/+1 on it. That's a really good card. Especially with today's meta, where you can bounce out a whole lot of minions potentially, depending on what kind of cards you have in your deck. That's like a very good card. Not even, I'm going to set tradable aside because we just talked about tradable. But what's even more impressive about Traveling Merchant, which Frostwolf Warlord does as well, but Traveling Merchant does even better, is usually when you play a 2-drop, it sticks around for a turn because your opponent is just playing a 2-drop, right? Or you had coined out a 3-drop and you're going to follow it up with a Traveling Merchant. And your opponent is not going to just be able to remove your 3-drop on the turn that you play it. So you have a very high, like just think about your games, you have a very high likelihood of having Traveling Merchant just also be a 3 mana 3/4 as a play. Now, 3 mana 3/4s aren't the best cards in the game by far, but it is a very good option for a win more card to also function as a normal curve card, right? So rather than think of it as just a win more card, it's a win more card, and 75% of the time it's a curve card. And when you're not winning more, it helps you find an answer on top of that for the tradable. Just so many options. It's like, it doesn't look like it's doing a lot of different things. It looks like it's doing one thing very specifically, but this card actually does pretty much everything you need the card to do. It's a super flexible card. And if you do get, let's say, you're kind of winning, you're a little stronger on the board, good players are going to be a little better than that. And remember, this is United in Stormwind meta. This is no Ashes of Outlands. This is no Skullman's Academy. This is Battlemaster is in the game. Everybody's going to be trying to get on the board. Tempo is super important. So the good players are going to be on the board more because your goals are aligned. You're just fighting for the board, right? This is United in Stormwind. You're kind of gutting it out, battling it out on the board. If you have the upper hand in this, you play Traveling Merchant. You play 2 other minions, which is super easy to do because your minions are going to skew a little smaller in any case because you're playing a more aggressive game because Battlemaster exists in the meta and you want to, 1, protect against it, but also 2, be able to take advantage of Battlemaster. You are now going to get something like an easy +3/+3, maybe +4/+4 on this. So it becomes something like a 3 mana 5/6 or a 3 mana 6/7. And now you're talking about like whatever that Druid Drake, the Druid 3 mana Drake after it gets corrupted, it starts looking more similar to that card, which that card is like an A. So this isn't as good as that card, but it's more flexible in that you could trade it, and it has the same upside as that card. It has a little bit higher of a downside, but it also has a little more flexibility, and you don't have to be a druid to have access to it. So that's my like pitch for it being actually a sneaky, really good like B+ level card, rather than I don't know where other people may put it. But I really like this card, especially for the arena.
I don't know where other people are putting it. So the thing is, we're not like so far apart when it comes to our letter ratings. So you like this as a B+. I like it as a very low B. But if this were the old tier list, I think you guys would be like, oh man, you guys are like like 40 points apart, right? Which is very significant. Like that means there's a real difference there. Here, if you're just like, wait, it's like you're fighting between a B and a B+. I think it's a weak B. ADWCTA thinks it's like a strong B+. So yeah, we are like 40 points apart. Just to like, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, just to, at this point, really hammer it into you guys, kind of the ranges that we're looking at.
Like here. I think this is like Scorpit level, if not better. Like that's
well,
what a B plus is.
well, Scorpid is like
Sorry,
which Scorpid?
The 4-mana Scorpid, not the 3-mana Scorpid.
Okay, Burrowing Scorpid.
Burrowing Scorpid.
Because
Yes.
you know when people Scorpid is Venomous Scorpid.
Poor Burrowing Scorpid.
Venomous Scorpid.
See, a B plus doesn't cut it. You got to be an A, or else you get no recognition. You get your name taken from you.
Well, yeah, like that's like you could be Scottie Pippen, but if you're in the same team as Jordan, you'll be remembered. You just won't be remembered in exactly the same way, you know.
But yeah, Scorpid is very good and it's very flexible, and you want it in all your decks, and that's kind of where Traveling Merchant is. I can't think of a deck I wouldn't want Traveling Merchant in.
No, like it's a good card, right? By the way, a B is a card that you are happy not only to like to see, you're happy to take. Like you are happy to take B cards. Because remember, this is like the Stoneskin Basilisk level around there. This is going to be like the Burrowing Scorpid, you know, kind of cards. So they're good. Like you're happy to take them. But if you're looking at the old tier list, we are currently about 40 points apart. That's pretty big. Like that's big. Yeah.
I see how you look at this card and you're like, it's a little below a 150. I'm like, this is like this is a good curve card more than 75% of the time on almost any mana. Like maybe not mana 4, right? On 5 you can play with a 2-drop. On 6 you can play with a 3-drop. Like, and if there's something on the board, you get an extra bonus 1/1. Like it's good tempo everywhere in a tempo centric.
It's good.
Meta.
It's good. Yeah. So once again, like we're harping on the differences. I'm just saying this is a good card in the deck, and ADWCTA is like, no, this is like close to one of the best cards in your deck. That's the real difference here.
Yeah, but it's subtle. You're not gonna like play this card and be like, I win the game. You know, that's not what this card is about. Yeah.
And as you'll see, there's not too many huge differences that we're going to have. We'll point out the differences that we had, but we typically reach a consensus.
All right. Next up are the 6 cards that make up the rest of the B tier for neutrals. Remember, this is about where we have a Basilisk, right? It's like a really good
Basilisk, Burrowing Scorpid.
No, Burrowing Scorpid is low B plus, if not like we have Burrowing Scorpid at like a 180 on the tier list.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like the close to a B plus. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Like it's this is the stuff that we have. Like we call this what do we officially call it? We officially call this the Basilisk tier and the Blessing of Kings tier. That we're moving into. Okay, so we have 6 cards that go into that tier, and if you get a Basilisk, you're like, and Basilisk kind of brings up the rear on that one. But if you get it, you're like, this is really good. You know, like I'm very happy with this card in the deck. And the first of such cards is, and this is really interesting because Merps had to talk to me about it and explain to me how this card worked, and I did not think this card needed any explanation of how it worked, but apparently it did. Because
you did.
It dropped the score quite a bit. And it's Encumbered Pack Mule. It's a very interesting card. So Encumbered Pack Mule is a 2-mana 2/3 beast, rare, with Taunt. So, it's a pretty good drop. But it has this extra text that says, when you draw this, add a copy of it to your hand. So now you're like sneaky. This is like Sneaky Delinquent, except instead of on a Deathrattle, you already have it, which means you can also play it as a 4-drop. And you all know how good Sneaky Delinquent is. So, Sneaky Delinquent, by the way, would be at least a B, if not probably like it's probably a B. But this card, like a 2/3 taunt, is better than a 3/1 stealth. I think we can all agree on that. And it's generating the card more, and it can be a 4-drop. So, we're still only rating this one a B because of how this mechanic works. You wanna explain how this mechanic works? Because I did not get it from reading this card.
I don't know if I exactly agree that a 2/3 taunt is better than a 3/1.
Really? You'd rather have a 3/1 stealth than a 2/3 taunt?
Yeah,
I think I would so much rather have a 2/3 taunt.
I'd rather have the 3/1 stealth. However, so ADWCTA originally had this, at an A. I was like, okay, you have to be misunderstanding the card. So if you guys read this, when you draw this, add a copy of it to your hand. When you mulligan, you're not drawing it. You are mulliganing, and like I don't know what word you want to use, but like that's not a draw. So if you keep this in your opening hand, you don't get the extra copy. The only time you get the extra copy is if you naturally draw it from your deck once the game like begins, you know? Which means
And
that
if you
extra
see
value,
this card in your mulligan, you're keeping it.
yeah. It's like, are you not keeping a 2-drop? Well, then you're not
A good
like
2-drop.
yeah, it's a good 2, right? 2 mana 2/3 taunt. Like it even has a little bit of extra on top of it. So if you keep it, you give up the extra value, but you recognize the, being able to play it on 2. And then if you don't get it, or if for some reason you toss it back and then you get it back, it's like, oh, okay, well, you don't have a small card, you have a flexible, bigger card now. So there you go. So it's a B because like if you draw it later on in the game, it avoids that issue of small cards being really small. It's still not like the biggest card,
Yeah.
right? But
Like a
you
mid-sized
get a
card at
Sora,
that point.
yeah, you get a Sora Knight Chain Gang that is more flexible because you can play one at a time instead of together. But it is not as good as some people might think it is at the very beginning because, and this is very elegantly done by the design team. They designed it such that, oh, you want it at the beginning when you really want it to play, then you don't get this extra value. And if you don't draw it early on, we'll give you that extra value. That's pretty much it. So it's a B. It's good.
Yeah, you're going to actually keep it in the mulligan. Of all the times you end up actually seeing this card in a game, you're probably going to have it in the mulligan and keep it in the mulligan, like somewhere between a third to a quarter of the time. So it's quite impactful on its value. That a third to a quarter of the time you don't get the extra 2 mana 2/3 taunt in your hand. All right, next up is the Pandarian Importer. Pandarian Importer. Also a tier B. This card is a 2 mana 1/3 battle cry. Discover a spell that didn't start in your deck. So the first thing you're going to think of, and I think you should think of, is Wandmaker. Because Wandmaker is a 2 mana 2/2, and you discover a 1 mana spell. This one's not limited to a 1 mana spell, but
Wait, how is this like Wandmaker at all? Because you're not. Yeah, it's 1 mana and you don't get to discover. You just get it. I don't get it.
What do you mean? Oh, right. Wandmaker doesn't have a discover.
Yeah.
My bad. But yeah. So yeah. So you want to talk more about this card?
Okay, sure. I will talk about it. It's a B, which is once again really good. You're giving up a stat as well. Remember, we're in a meta in which you shouldn't expect to give up stats to discover something. So you're already paying something already. Discovering a spell that didn't start in your deck, it could be good. Now, here's the thing. You are going to clog up your pool with a lot of really bad stuff. Now, there are just going to be some stuff that you weren't able to draft that is still very, very good. So that's fine. Like, on average, your choices are still going to be quite good. It's just going to be a little bit disappointing when you can't get some good cards. Because immediately, what are you boxing out? You are boxing out some really good cards, right? Like you're going to draft good spells. You completely box those out. So how does the pool look? It doesn't look bad. Like it's not terrible, right? It's still a spell. You're still going to have very good spells that you weren't able to draft. Some mediocre ones, some situational ones that might be very good now that you just don't draft in the draft. So it's going to be fine. Like it's absolutely fine. But it does hurt it a little bit, right? Like the stat hurts it a little bit.
It hurts it more than a little bit. Like you're gonna have like something like 4 or 5 different spells that you draft, and all of them are going to be the good ones. Like you're not gonna take the bad spells presumably, and there's only so many spells. So the pool is actually quite significantly diluted. I think we're kind of underselling how diluted the pool gets, because if you take out 4 good options out of like even like 30, That's shifting the odds quite a bit when you only had I don't know, like 20 good options out of 30 to begin with.
Yeah. So
like maybe 22,
like
23.
it's good, right? And part of the reason that this is good is because like your mage scribe is gone, right? Your wand thieves are gone. Like your class specific ones are gone. Your steward of scroll is gone. So like this is just better. Once you eliminate some really good competition, this just looks a little bit better by comparison as well. But yeah, it's fine. It's a beat.
Yeah. Also, what's hurting it? I just want to set the bar because wand maker is actually like a bit better than this, even though it doesn't have a discover, I think. And what's driving the difference for me here is that a 2-mana 1/3 is so much worse than a 2-mana 2/2 played on 2. So much worse. A 2-mana 2/2 takes care of 3 2s. A 2-mana 1/3 doesn't. A 2-mana 2/2 takes care of 2 2s. A 2-mana 1/3 kind of takes care of 2 2s, but it's a little iffy at that point. Like, the difference between a 2/2 and a 1/3 on turn 2 is pretty dramatic. And I think that has quite a significant impact between the two. Like, one has a discover and one doesn't, and one can discover any kind of cards, and the other one only is limited to 1-mana cards, which are, I think, generally less good than if you could just discover any kind of like spell. But I would still rather have a wand maker than a Pandarian Importer, just because it's going to be played on 2 a lot, and this one's going to set you back. And again, you're in a temple meta, so being set back is more important these days than before this rotation.
Yep. Once again, for me, this is not like a strong B or anything. So for some people who might think like, wait, Venomous Scorpid is just like 1 tier higher. Once again, the difference between like a low B and a high A, you're looking at like more than 100 points. You're looking at, from like a 150 on the old tier list to like a 260 or like a 250-ish card. And if you remember, that's like a world of difference, right? Like we can look at, there are quite a few cards that are at the 150 range. There are only a few cards ever printed that are, in the high A or like, nearing the A plus range to have ever existed in Hearthstone, period. So once again, this is where we're at. And that's how cards are, right? Like, there are a lot of cards that are printed that are of B quality. That's just kind of the way it is, right? And then Hearthstone, every once in a while, the devs will create something that is busted, that is just completely broken. And that's, we accept that. But you're going to see a lot of stuff in the Bs and Cs, and that's the way game design is, right? You should expect to see the vast majority of it there, and this extreme bell curve. And then once in a while, we'll see like 1S. We'll see some A's, and then we're getting into a lot of B's, a lot of C's. We'll try to tell you the differences within, but that's so if you're thinking right now, because I see people already comparing it to like Venomous Scorpid, and I understand, right?
Yeah.
This is a huge
amount
gap
less than Venomous Scorpid.
Yeah,
right?
but it's still. I mean,
it's a lot
it
worse
is a
than
huge gap.
Venomous Scorpid. So the next card is a card that I'm going to preview by saying I thought it was freaking insane when I looked at it, and then I did a whole bunch of math and I was like, why is it not as insane? And then I had to think about it more. It is Enthusiastic Banker.
I never had to think about it.
Okay, well, good for you. It's a 3-mana 2/3. At the end of your turn, store a card from your deck. Deathrattle, add the store cards to your hand. So for every turn this is alive, it's guaranteed 1 card to basically draw you 1 card upon it dying. And for every turn it stays alive, it'll draw you another card, and you get all the cards whenever you die. So you could potentially get a whole bunch of cards if the thing never dies. Until you kill it off. And 3-mana 2/3 is obviously not good, but like a 3-mana 2/3 that draws you a card is already, I don't know if that's B tier or like just really high C tier, but it's already almost at B tier. So this card that could guaranteed to draw you 1 card, but can very easily draw you more than 1 card, is actually not like that much better than just a 3-mana 2/3 that draws you a card. Now, It is better. You know, it is significantly better. I think a 3-mana 2/3 that draws you a card is a C plus. But I thought it was going to be bonkers because of the potential to draw you a bunch of cards, and it's not just because you don't get the cards for a really long time if you're actually drawing more than one card, and drawing cards like 3 turns later is not anywhere near as good as drawing 3 cards now.
That's the
So
thing.
that's what was messing up my I just thought of it in terms of card advantage rather than also in terms of the amount of options that you get on each turn.
The difference is, for example, the 3-mana 2/3 that immediately draws you a card. Like, let's say you're top decking, right?
Mm-hmm.
That card is amazing. That card is amazing because whatever you draw, you have a pretty high chance that you can play it and then gain the momentum.
And in this upcoming
back.
meta, you're going to be top decking again,
Yeah.
like frequently.
Yep. So this card is it's good. Like it's a B. It's fine. It's good. But you're not getting that card immediately, right? And then of course, if you get 2 cards, that's tempered by the fact that you're getting both of them later, like a decent amount later. And because of that, it's not higher. Like, so the better it gets, also the worse it gets.
Yeah.
In a way.
It's interestingly balanced.
Yep. So good design once again. I like it. I like the flavor of it as well, but that's what holds it back from being better. Also, a 3-mana 2/3 is like, ugh. It's one of the worst stat lines in terms of curve. A 3-mana 2/3.
Yeah, you can't play this on curve. You can't.
Such a bad stat line. Yeah. So it's fine.
I don't understand the art, because this enthusiastic banker looks really bored. Is that like a joke that like all bankers are like super bored, even the enthusiastic ones?
I don't know. I mean, I guess there is that trope of people working the counter at like banks or the DMV and just being bored. I guess this is just playing off of that.
Okay. Well, the joke was okay. I mean, maybe other people will find it more funny. I also can't remember the last time I actually went to a bank, though, so that may be coloring this. Next one is, we're still in tier B, the B tier. It is a Nobleman. Nobleman, another 3-mana 2/3 that basically draws you a card. It is a 3-mana 2/3 epic card. Battlecry, create a golden copy of a random card in your hand. So you are getting another card. It is a good card because you selected those cards, presumably from the draft, and you can somewhat control what it hits. Not perfectly, unless you're doing it at the very end of your game, but you can skew the odds to your favor. And the golden card, being not Battlegrounds, is not actually meaningful, but that would have been cool. So this is. This is the better version of 3-mana 2/3 draw a card.
Yeah, it is a better version of that. And if you really, really want something in your hand to be copied or have a significantly higher chance to be copied, you can manipulate it. You can just play your other cards. If you just don't really care, then, well, it is just a 3-mana draw a card that you immediately get the kind of like, you immediately get the knowledge of, but it's also been something that you drafted, you saved, and you saved for a little bit. And you saving that card is typically a good thing, as in it is something that you weren't able to use, or you didn't want to use, like you weren't able to / you didn't want to use before, but the opportunity will probably present itself later on, unless you drafted something really techie and weird, like BGH or something. But this is different from you just drawing a card. You just drawing a card out of your deck randomly that you drafted before, versus you getting something that, yes, you drafted before, but you have held in your hand. You're able to manipulate your chances of getting that card. And then even if you aren't, you just spam this, right? You're like, okay, well, like whatever happens. You have saved the cards in your hand for a little bit of time. And on average, that should be better than just like you drawing a random card. So it's pretty good.
All right, next card is Cheesemonger. Cheesemonger is a 4-mana 3/6 already on curve 4-drop that says whenever your opponent casts a spell, add a random spell with the same cost to your hand. So a 4-mana 3/6 would be pretty much at the very bottom of C tier. This brings it up to a B tier because you're not going to remove it on the turn you play it, most likely, because it's got 6 health, and really limits your opponent's options. But it doesn't actually stop it. Your opponent can just give you, concede and give you a random card. And random spells, again, are not like the best things. But they could be pretty decent. Your opponent wouldn't want to do that, but it is an option.
This card is good. Like, to me, this is all right. So we're talking about Bs, right? And everything's a B and everything. But remember, the range is like pretty decent here. This is to me a strong B.
Mhm.
Like, it's not a B plus, but it's a strong B. Like, this is this is higher than some of the other stuff that we've talked about here.
Yep.
3/6, respectable stat line, right? Very respectable stat line. For something like this, you want a 3/6. It's what makes, for example, like Ogremancer on 5 as
Ogremancer is a
3/7.
2/7. Or sorry, it's a 3/7. But yeah, it has
a 3/7.
It doesn't get as much stats for the 5-drop as this.
Yeah.
Right? This is just like strictly better. Okay. This is strictly better in terms of the body, right? For
the body, right?
Cost.
Yes.
Whereas random spell versus 2/2 taunt, you can debate which you'd rather have.
Right. And look, the spell can suck. You're getting spells.
Mhm.
Like, on average, not every if you're playing this, not every single time you're gonna get a really good spell, or sometimes even just a usable spell at all. But you're still getting spells, and your hit rate on those is going to be pretty decent. So every single time they play a spell or forced to play a spell, you have a shot of getting something really, really freaking good. Whether it's big stuff or small stuff, spells are just really good now.
Spells are really good now,
but
but there are 3 old sets in this. So keep that in mind. So the new spells are good, but the old spells are potentially iffy.
Mm-hmm. So this is quite good. Like, this is one where I was like, oh man, is it a B plus?
Like, if you think that you're going to get a spell, it's great, right? Like, if this just said 4-mana 3/6, add a random spell to your hand, this will be like higher than this. But it's not. Your opponent will most likely be able to play around it, and it doesn't count weapons, so your opponent can still weapon, and it wouldn't count. It just kind of freezes your opponent for a little bit. That's really the effect. Like, your opponent is in the driver's seat.
But and then of course this is one of those things where your opponent, or even you, if you're facing this, could be like, screw it, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll just use the spell, and if they get a good one, that's fine. But like, I'm banking on them getting a bad one.
Think of how often Ogremancer triggers. Like, it rarely triggers, but it does change how you play, right? It's like a secret that's not very secretive. It changes the way how you play, even though Ogremancer never summons. Like, every now and then it summons a thing, right? And then you're like, oh, Ogremancer value. But what it always does is make your opponent play weird. Okay, and finally we are on to our last card. Our last card in the B tier to round out these, like, quote-unquote good cards before we move on to the quote-unquote normal cards in the next segment. It is Stormwind Guard. Stormwind Guard is a 5-mana 4/5 taunt battlecry. Give adjacent minions +1/+1. It's like a reverse Defender of Argus. Rather than giving things taunt and buffing them, it gives the same buff, but it itself is the taunt.
It's good. Like, I don't know what more there is to say about this. It's good, right? Like, we've talked about Defender of Argus. Fungalmancer is another kind of like comparable thing to this, because people are like, oh, it buffs 2 things on turn 5. It's very different from Fungalmancer in how it interacts with the board and how it impacts it. But sure, we can talk about these like snowball 5s, if you want to call it that.
And more so than like something like Fungalmancer, this is like, if you just have 1 minion that's on the board, you've already gotten value out of it.
Yeah. The thing that's really good about this card, especially, and once again, we talk about the lack of Aug Merchants, so the non-ping classes are, don't have the options that they had before. The taunt is very, very relevant because you're only, quote unquote, giving these things +1/+1. So a lot of times when you buff them up and then you value trade with it, those minions by themselves are quite vulnerable, right? Like, they are very vulnerable. They might have 2 health or maybe even 1 health.
No more Penflinger, no more Aug Merchants.
You don't have those. Yeah. So the taunt on this 4/5 body is very relevant, very, very, very relevant. And part of what makes this just a really good card. Like, yeah, you know, you get some good stats. This body is very respectable as well. But man, having taunt on this thing such that you can't as easily access the stuff that just value traded and might be a 1 or 2 health with like your 1/1s or whatever that you might have on the board, super relevant.
Yep. All right. Well, that wraps up our top 8 cards of United and Stormwind. You got the one card at top that's going to dominate everything in terms of how the meta goes, Battlegrounds Battlemaster. That's going to be like, I'm going to like how the meta goes with the exception of Battlegrounds Battlemaster. But Battlegrounds Battlemaster is going to be such a big part of this meta. And then we have the slightly controversial card in Traveling Merchant about just how good the flexibility of Traveling Merchant is. That's the 3-mana 2/3 Frostwolf giant kind of like equivalent that's also tradable. I've pegged it a number 2. Merps wants it the same as all the other cards that we talked about, but it's kind of it's kind of there. And then we talked about 6 cards that are going to be those are all good cards. These are all cards that you will want to take in your deck, not that you'll be like, oh, I guess I'll take it and it'll be okay.
Yep. So for me, guys, once again, because we're talking within like A's and B's and everything, if I were to differentiate, and I try to think about this as well. It's not just like, oh, lump it all into here. Obviously, Battleground Battlemaster, that for both of us, it's a clear cut above. That's why we both put it in A. For me, I would not put, once again, for me, Traveling Merchant is like a low B, right? Which would make it kind of like one of the lowest ones of the ones that we talked about. And for me, none of them rose to the level of a B plus, but Stormwind Guard would be a high B. You know, Cheesemonger would be like a high B. And some of the other ones, for example, like Encumbered Pack Mule or you know, the 3-mana 2/3s, those would be lower B's ish. But not enough to differentiate in this scale. Like, we don't want that exact granularity.
Like when you draft, it's much more situational than that. That like you don't need that. There's no Like I don't think it's as helpful these days when it comes to drafting anyway.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's see you guys on the next video where we'll talk about the normal cards in United and Stormwind. Hey, before you say bye, let's give some shout outs. I want to give a shout out to David Attenborough Says, our YouTube editor, who will be working really hard tonight to get all these up sometime tomorrow. Today, we're recording this on a Sunday, and it's not going to all be ready until like late Sunday night probably. So we're going to try to get them up throughout the day on Monday, so that you guys can listen to this and watch this before the set actually comes out, if you choose to.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's it for us. We'll see you in the next video where we talk about the normal cards. Bye.
Cool. Bye.